I went to a diamond store and had the original diamonds of my wedding ring appraised to see how much they would be worth. And then I decided to have synthetic stones made that looked identical so I could switch them out, but it still would look like the ring was on my finger. And so I had to wait 3 weeks to have the stones cut just right. And then I went back 3 weeks later and switched out the stones, got my big check, and then took my big check to the attorney and said, let's go.
Welcome to another episode of the Simply Retirement Podcast. I am your host, Eric Blake, practicing retirement planner for over 25 years, founder of Blake Wealth Management, and I would not be the man I am today without the women in my life. On today's episode, I'm going to be joined by Claudia Porter, wealth advisor at RFG Advisory. And today we're going to talk about the difficult decision to move forward with divorce, overcoming fear and uncertainty, and what it can look like to navigate a major life transition with clarity, confidence, and direction. And before I introduce our guest, you might be asking, well, why would he have another financial advisor as a guest on his podcast? And that's because Claudia and I are both with RFG Advisory, and in getting to know her, what stood out most to me is her story. It is a story of resilience, determination, and moving forward through difficult life transitions. And quite honestly, it actually resonates with me because I hear so much of what my mom went through. And I was the only child. Claudia actually has 4 boys. But that desire to make it work, to show up for your family, it really hit home for me. And I was really excited to share this platform with Claudia so she could share her story because I know it's one that is going to resonate with so many of you listening today. Claudia Porter, welcome to the Simply Retirement Podcast.
Thank you, Eric. I'm super excited to be here today.
Absolutely. And we've gotten a chance to know each other, and I just have been inspired by the chance we got a chance to talk, a couple of weeks ago now. And that's where I want to start. I just want to start with your story. Just tell us a little bit about your journey, including your own experience going through divorce and what that looked like for you.
Yeah, thank you. So I am originally from Germany and moved here in 2001 and then met my now ex-husband a couple years after I got here. And we fell in love. We got married. We had 4 boys in 4.5 years. And really, our marriage struggles began when we had 3 boys and a 4th one on the way. I was just exhausted, sleep deprived. It was very stressful. And we did have some hired help, but it was a lot to manage. And simply what stood out for me during that time that was really stressful was that my husband was in control of all the finances, and a lot of things just felt like a moving target. I could never get anything right, and I didn't have a say in anything. And I was a professor at the time and taught very sporadically just to keep my foot in the door, but he was, like I said, he was in control of all the finances. And things just got to a point where the marriage just kept deteriorating. We were in couples therapy for quite some time. And then at some point, he revealed that he had made sure I could never divorce him because if I dared to divorce him, I would be homeless and penniless because he had me sign a prenuptial agreement when we were still dating. And I honestly didn't quite understand what this was about at the time. We hadn't really talked about marriage. He kind of surprised me with this at a bank in front of a notary, and I didn't really understand what it was. And he presented it as a formality, something that people sign here in the U.S. When they get married. There hadn't been a proposal. I said, I don't understand what this document means, but trusted that he had my best interests at heart, and because we were in love. And so I signed it, and then he brought this up in couples therapy, and it really stopped me in my tracks. I was thinking, wait a minute, what does this mean? And so I called a friend, and she said, well, you have to find this document. And so I found it after a 2-hour search in a folder in the basement that had my name on it, and then reread it with 8 more years of English and understood that I had the right to take it to an attorney. So I talked to one attorney, and he said, well, I'm not touching this because Oregon upholds all prenuptial agreements. And then what's going to end up happening, because your name isn't on the title of the house and there's no spousal support, you're going to be living in the van with the 4 boys because you can't afford to rent a house in Portland. And a panic just crept in. I was like, well, how is this possible? And so then I started talking to other parents at my kids' school. They were just in preschool and kindergarten at the time. And one mother Googled reasons why a prenuptial agreement may not be valid. And she handed me a list, and on the top of the page, there was the name of an attorney that his last name was the German name for angel. And I thought that's a sign. So I'm going to call this guy, and I called him, and he ended up being my attorney. He gave me a free consultation, and we talked through this, and he said, well, this doesn't sound right. It sounds like there may not be a meeting of the minds because you didn't have a legal consultation about this prenuptial agreement, but we need to take it to court for this first, and then you can divorce him. And so I didn't know how to retain him because he gave me this big number of his retainer. I think it was like $5,500 or $6,000 or something. And I talked very sporadically, so I really had no idea how to come up with this money to retain him. So and I grew up with these ideals of, being loyal and working things out so the kids have a home with two parents. And so I kept trying to work things out and just kept deteriorating, and it wasn't getting anywhere. And I got to a point where I realized this is not a good role model for my children, because this is not a relationship they should emulate in any way. And it's not healthy for me. It's not healthy for them. I have to get out. And so what I ended up doing is I went to a diamond store and had the original diamonds of my wedding ring appraised to see how much they would be worth. And then I decided to have synthetic stones made that looked identical so I could switch them out, but it still would look like the ring was on my finger. And so I had to wait 3 weeks to have the stones cut just right. And then I went back 3 weeks later and switched out the stones, got my big check, and then took my big check to the attorney and said, let's go. And I was terrified at that point. So that's kind of the start of the divorce. And I had no idea what would happen. I was told I had to stay in the home, so I wouldn't abandon the home. And I had no idea how long I had to stay. It ended up being for another full year before I was allowed to move out. But yeah, it was terrifying, and it was a hostile environment, obviously, after I had filed for divorce, even more so. So it was a very difficult time, and it was just always taking just the one next step, but I didn't really know what the whole path looked like.
So what did you feel like your biggest personal struggle was as you were trying to make the decision and then starting to move forward? What did you struggle with the most going through that?
I struggled, first of all, with, what would my life look like if I took this leap of faith? And I had no idea what the finances would look like, how I would rebuild something and take care of 4 boys. And then taking that leap of faith that I only knew the next step and nothing beyond that. And then trusting that the road would kind of present itself, which it did. But that was the hardest thing for me, to take that first step.
Right. And I wanted to ask you, so in your book, On the Other Side, you talked about how important journaling was during your journey. Can you share a little bit about that and raising awareness? That was one of the big points I took from your book, is that raising awareness is so critical, especially when somebody's going through a difficult scenario or difficult transition, like a divorce or any number of life transitions that might happen. But just how raising self-awareness is so important.
Yeah, that's a great question. So journaling helped me because I felt very much caught up in this web where I couldn't really see. It was all foggy, and I couldn't really see what I was dealing with, and and where I was going. And so what journaling did for me was to put some distance between me and what was going on in my life. And then I could look at that with some distance, put it away, and then look at it a few days later or maybe a week later and see and read again and get clarity. It just helped me get a lot of clarity by stepping back and having some distance between what was happening in my life and who I was, because I felt so caught up in everything. And it's hard to kind of see what's going on when you're raising 4 little boys, and you have all of this going on. There's just no way to have clarity.
Right. Well, and something interesting happened. You've already kind of touched on it, but I wanted to just pull it out just a little bit more, that your case actually set a precedent as it relates to the prenuptial agreement. Can you talk a little bit about that? What happened and some of the stories you've heard actually since going through that process?
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. So, the prenuptial agreement, there were three court hearings about the prenuptial agreement, and the judge threw it out because she said there wasn't a meeting of the minds. And we should have had a legal consultation because it was too complex to understand, even for a trained lawyer. So she said there wasn't a meeting of the minds, you didn't have a consultation, and nobody could have signed this in 5 minutes and understood that they were signing away their rights. So then there were 7 more divorce hearings to resolve the divorce. And I was awarded a small percentage of what my ex had and support for 8 years. Well, he appealed all the finances to the Court of Appeals and then to the Supreme Court of Oregon because he wanted to make sure that this prenuptial agreement was upheld. And what ended up happening is the Court of Appeals affirmed the case, and the Supreme Court 4 years later, so the whole process took 6 years, um, again affirmed what the trial court had ruled and what the appeals court had ruled, and dismissed the case basically. And this case is now or set a precedent in that you cannot just go somewhere and have somebody sign a prenuptial agreement. You have to have legal consultation and you have to sign it in front of a lawyer. So it's now helping a lot of other people that didn't sign it legally and need to get out of a pickle. So it did make a difference.
That was an amazing story. When you told me that, it was like, how many lives did that change potentially just from the unfortunate of you going through it, of course, but the fact that positive aspect came out of it, I think is amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. I was pretty excited to hear that.
And then at some point, of course, you made the decision to get into financial services. How did you come to that decision? Was it something, did that happen after the divorce was finalized? Where within your journey did that happen?
It happened. So I got divorced in 2013. And then of course there was the appeal court case. I was asked to stay in Portland for visitation purposes, and I was in linguistics previously, and there weren't really any positions in linguistics. There were only adjunct teaching positions, and I couldn't put food on the table with that. So I was getting a little bit of support to rent and to have childcare to rebuild my career, but it wasn't enough to cover all my bills, and especially with the legal proceedings still going on. And I found the one linguistics position in Portland at a hospital where I was, supervising interpreters and doing an educational campaign around the hospital about why it's important to use language services. But then that didn't work out after a year. And so I felt like doors just kept closing in on me. And so again, there was, more fear because it was the additional, now I have to change careers too. I just had this big life change. Now I have to change careers too. What am I going to do? And I took a deep dive into what do I really want out of life? What am I passionate about? And I didn't want a job. I wanted a career and build something bigger than myself that my boys could also benefit from. And so I talked to friends, and I had some friends that were at a Rotary Club. So they said, well, just come to Rotary as a guest. We'll need somebody with your skills. And I was invited as an intern at a small wealth management firm locally, and instantly fell in love with the business. It was unpaid, but I thought, well, what do I have to lose? Let me check this out. And I just, on day one, I fell in love with the business, and it brought back my earlier passion after high school when I wanted to do exactly this. But at that time, I was talked out of it by men who thought, this is a men's industry, and what are you even thinking going into this? This isn't for women. And so here I was at this juncture, and I was thinking, oh my gosh, I just did a 360. This is what I wanted to do after high school. So here's my chance to turn this into a success. And after 6 months, I realized I wasn't able to keep up with my bills. I had to go somewhere where, I could get paid. So I went to a big brokerage firm to get a base salary and learn the industry. And then over time, found my way to now being independent with RFG, which is super exciting.
Awesome. And I would love for you to share just how your own experience has shaped the work that you're doing today.
Really, my passion when I was in high school, when I graduated from high school, I didn't know why I wanted to do this. I just knew I wanted to do this. And now I bring to the table this passion to empower people to make good decisions about their money, to help couples have conversations about their finances, so that hopefully that'll help their relationships last, because that's such a big thing for any kind of relationship, to have a solid foundation. And then for anybody, women and men equally, that are going through a big life transition. I mean, I've gone through multiple big life transitions, the divorce probably being the biggest one. um, just dealing with the emotional side of these things, and helping people make good decisions, because it's so hard to make good decisions when you're emotionally off, so
Right.
to say, because of this big transition that you're going through. And being able to help people navigate these important things, and then finding the new identity and the new goals for the path ahead, and then realigning their finances with the new life after that. So I'm super passionate about that. So it's really where I make the biggest impact, and I really truly enjoy it. This is what gets me up every day.
Hi, everyone. It's Eric. Hope you're enjoying today's episode. I want to take just a quick moment to share a resource I think you'll find really valuable. If you've ever asked yourself, how much is my Social Security reduced if I file early? Or am I eligible for benefits as a spouse, surviving spouse, or even after divorce? You're not alone. That's why we created our ultimate guide to women's Social Security success. It includes 6 of our most popular Social Security guides and checklists for women. Inside, you'll find a 2026 quick reference guide with key Social Security amounts and limits to be aware of, along with 5 additional guides and checklists to help you make more informed decisions about eligibility and filing strategies. You can download it for free at womenssocialsecurityguide.com. Keep it handy wherever you may be in the decision-making process. Now, back to the episode. I would love to hear your perspective on this too. One of the things we talk a lot about on the podcast is how can you slow things down so better decisions can be made, especially when we're talking about that conflict. We get these emotions and financial decisions clashing. What do you do, or what are some of the skills you use to help clients that when everything just feels urgent, to just kind of step back and slow the pace down a little bit?
Yeah, so typically what I do is, I'm the sounding board. I just listen to what's going on with the client, first of all. But then I hone in on what is the most important thing right now. What is the one thing, the one step that you can take today that is the most important thing that needs to be done today. And then we can look at everything else as the time comes, as things come up and are necessary to be dealt with. We're not going to deal with the whole thing. We're just going to take the most important thing right now and look at that, and what can you do with what you already have right now. So, and that kind of goes back to, being resourceful, and helping clients find ways to do what they can with what they already have. So I'm going back to the diamonds that I had. Obviously not everybody has a diamond ring that they can use to retain an attorney, but looking for the thing that you already have that can be a resource for you today to take that next step.
Perfect. Well, and I think one of the things that stood out to me again from our conversations and from reading your book was that exact concept of find a way. And it's not always going to be easy, but just don't give up. Look for your opportunities to make a difference, and just take one small step. So I would like to again share what do you feel like a successful transition looks like, not just financially, but personally?
When you're in the decision making process, and you're not like, when you kind of realize, I can't really stay in this because it doesn't feel good, it's very painful, but you're afraid to take the step because of the big unknown ahead of you. You have to kind of, um how should I say this? You have to kind of look at, is where do I want to be in 5 years from now? Because if you're in a painful spot and it's not going to get better, that pain is only going to grow. So the success is to let go of the fear of uncertainty. We all have the fear of uncertainty. Nobody likes uncertainty. I don't like uncertainty today. But it's something that we have to live with, and finding a way to be comfortable with the uncomfortable, trusting that the next step will present itself. That's the first successful step, I would say, building that trust. Um, and then rolling up your sleeve and taking action. I think that's what I would say is the greatest success. And because the path really will show itself. I experienced that. For the longest time, I was asking, questions like I was in this victim mode, like, why is this happening to me? And you really have to let go of that mindset and ask a better question, such as, why is this happening for me? Or, for me instead of to me, because then your mind will shift towards looking for solutions and the solutions will come.
The other thing I was going to ask you is just, again, one of the things that happens a lot is not knowing where to turn, not who or who to turn to, more importantly, but the importance of having a team around you, whether it's a financial advisor, it's a coaches, different things like that. So, from your perspective, how important is it to have the right team around you to help guide you or provide guidance and advice when you're going through a transition like this?
I think that is super important. You don't want to walk this alone. So I had a really good attorney and I trusted him and he was very available to me. He, with all the things that happened, he basically told me, like, just call me on my cell phone on Sunday, on a weekend. And so there are so many resources out there. So if you're going to need a good financial planner who's going to help you uh, look at the finances around this and what your next best step is. You're going to need a good attorney, or, in some cases, if it's more amicable, you could maybe use a divorce consultant who helps you understand what this even looks like and what you can expect on the other side of things and what a good attorney might be if you need an attorney.
Right.
Even having a trusted friend, and I would say preferably somebody that is not necessarily a family member, because family members or close friends that are also close friends with your current or ex-spouse might be biased. So probably somebody more neutral that you trust. That is really important because you're not going to be able to carry this alone. It's important to have somebody that can be a sounding board, and especially if you find a financial advisor that has any experience with this, has gone through it themselves, or has, experienced it like you have with your own mother, that's so important because they can relate and they can understand what you are going through and where your fear is coming from.
What I think that's one of the things I always share is that if you are the prospective client, you're looking to hire, whether it's a financial advisor, an attorney, ask them their story. I think sharing, every time I get the chance to share my story, I try to do so. But I think it helps people understand where you're coming from and why you do what you do. And I think that's really critical too, especially for somebody who's gone through what you have.
Hmm. Yeah.
So if there was someone that was listening right now, they're feeling overwhelmed, maybe unsure of what to do next, what is one small step they can take today to begin moving forward?
I think the first step I would take, again, is that question. Um, the first question is, what is the price of staying versus the price of moving? And if the answer is, yeah, I know I need to move, then the next question is, what is, what can I do right now with what I have? What is my first step? And don't even think about the second step because it will show itself when the time is right. You have to just take the first step and trust that it's right. And, if you're unsure of coming up with this yourself, I would contact a trusted person, a financial professional, an attorney, a divorce coach, or consultant, and start there and ask these questions.
Awesome. And I would love to have you share a little bit about the books that you've written. We've talked about one of them already on the other side, but you've actually written a couple of books. Would you be okay sharing a little bit about those?
Yeah, happy to do so. So the first book I wrote is called Women, Wealth, and Winning. And the purpose of that book is really to shake women out of the complacency and participate in the financial conversation. So if you're married today or not, But just participate in the financial conversation, tackle your finances, because that is going to be your key to being independent, and it's going to be your key to being empowered. So I've seen this too often, and I was put in that position because I wasn't really allowed in conversations about finances in my marriage, which was, something that I struggled with. Um, if you're participating in a conversation, and if something goes wrong down the road and you do have to get out of the marriage, or you lose a spouse due to death or illness, then you don't have to deal with this additional financial stress on the side. So you have the grieving process over here. That's a lot to deal with emotionally, but you don't have the additional stress. So I think it's super important for women to participate. And that's the reason I wrote that book. And it's just kind of an overview of what women can do to take action today to learn about finances and to start building something for themselves and participate in the conversation. And the second book, On the Other Side, is a book about how you can create success in the face of adversity, whether you're in a toxic relationship or you're in a toxic workplace, and what are some of the steps that you can take to get yourself out of that and still focus on the goal of the success that you visualize and move beyond that.
Well, that's what I think was so great about that book. Because it's a pretty easy read, but also you include a lot of those to-dos, like, okay, do this, so step by step, which I think can be really valuable for regardless of what the transition is. Obviously, you shared your story as an example of going through a pretty difficult divorce, but a lot of these steps can be taken regardless of what that transition is: losing a job, losing a spouse. So I think that was really valuable about that book as well.
Thank you.
So is there anything else, anything about your story, anything about the work that you do that I should have asked, but I didn't? Anything else you wanted to communicate to the listeners today?
No, you asked a lot of good questions. I think I would just leave the audience with the encouragement to take action. Consult with a trusted financial professional today, someone that is willing to hear your story and listen to you and help you along, and has the compassion to work with you and help you uncover those next steps and help you get there. And yeah, that's what I would say. That's what I'm passionate about, and I know you're passionate about that. So I would just encourage the audience to take action and not procrastinate. Do it today.
That's perfect. So if somebody wants to learn more about you and the work that you do, how can they do that? Where can they connect with you?
So they can connect with me at RFG Advisory. I have a website there, and I also have a LinkedIn profile. And I'm easy to connect with. I connect with a lot of people on LinkedIn, so you can reach out to me there and connect with me. There are some other podcasts I've been on to share my story. So those are also on my LinkedIn. And, happy to chat with anybody that wants to learn more.
Perfect. Well, we'll be sure to share all those links on in the show notes for this episode. Claudia, thank you so much for joining me. This has been a great conversation. As we wrap up this episode, I actually wanted to share a quote from your book that really stood out to me. And this is on the book from the other side, or On the Other Side. Remember, the situations you face don't define you. How you respond to them does. You have within you an incredible capacity for resilience, growth, and love. Trust in that capacity, nurture it, and most importantly, don't be afraid to lean on it when times get tough. As always, thank you for the listeners for tuning in. That's it for today's episode. For all the links and resources mentioned, you can visit the simplyretirementpodcast.com. Until next time, please remember, retirement is not the end of the road. It's the start of a new journey.
That's it for today's episode of the Simply Retirement Podcast. We hope you found our insights and advice helpful in planning for a fulfilling retirement. Don't forget to take action on what you've learned today. Visit our website at blakewealthmanagement.com to learn more about our firm and review our Simply Retirement Roadmap process to get you on the right path to the retirement you deserve. And don't forget to click the follow button to be notified when new episodes become available. Thank you for joining us on this journey, and we look forward to helping you achieve your retirement goals. Remember, retirement is not the end of the road, It is the start of a new journey, so embrace it and make the most of it. Until next time, take care. Content here is for illustrative purposes and general information only. It is not legal, tax, or individualized financial advice, nor is it a recommendation to buy, sell, or hold any specific security, or engage in any specific trading strategy. Results will vary. Past performance is no indication of future results or success. Market conditions change continuously. This commentary reflects the personal opinions, viewpoints, and analyses of Blake Wealth Management. It does not necessarily represent those of RFG Advisory, their clients, or their employees. This commentary should not be regarded as a description of advisory services provided by Blake Wealth Management or RFG Advisory, or performance returns of any client. The views reflected in the commentary are subject to change at any time without notice. Advisory services offered by investment advisory representatives of RFG Advisory, a registered investment advisor, Blake Wealth Management, and RFG Advisory are unaffiliated entities. Advisory services are only offered to clients or prospective clients where RFG Advisory and its representatives are properly licensed or exempt from licensure. No advisory services may be rendered by RFG Advisory unless a client agreement is in place.